we would like to welcome all of you to this important event. United Methodist Women have circulated the human rights petition throughout our organization of 1 million plus women and throughout our church. Now, let us gather the data on female human rights abuse. May the hearing today not discourage us or horrify us, but strengthen our resolve. Approximately 2 years ago, our center, with 20 women from other organizations around the world, began an international campaign to make the violations of women's human rights a part of the United Nations Agenda on Human Rights, with a particular focus on the 1993 Human Rights Conference that the United Nations will hold in Vienna in June. Our goal in this campaign is not simply the conference in June, but utilizing the world attention that will be focused on this conference to give voice to the violations that women experience, but not only to the victimization of women, but also to the actions that women are taking around the world to resist this victimization and to give voice to a vision of human rights that would include all of the population, women, men, children, all of the dispossessed of the world, taking claim for all of our human rights and seeing that those human rights must be a part of the world agenda.
I'm testifying on behalf of the women in Sudan and Somalia, not as their elected representative or something, just as part of my responsibility as a woman to testify to those violations. In both countries, women have been victimized by a civil war. Maybe it's more visible in Somalia than it is in the Sudan, but in both cases, the major sufferers are women. They are stricken by poverty because they have to be moved or removed or just moved by themselves to other places, be uprooted, and then nobody tenders to whatever needs they have. If we take the case of Somalia, it is the most aggravated situation, where in time of plenty, women were marginal beneficiaries, and in time of war, they became major sufferers. And as Somalia is paving its way, hopefully, into peace, we find that women will still be sufferers. If we follow the news, we find that women are being charged with prostitution. In a lawless place, people are not shying away from designing laws, especially for women, to control women, to deprive them of their freedom. The punishment is said to be a capital punishment, and that is done for women. So even when people lose their power in situations such as in Somalia, and they act scenes of power, the victims of those scenes of power are women.
I'm from the southern Sudan, and Asma is from the north. And in Sudan, we have Muslims, Arabs, and in the southern Sudan, we have the Christians. So I would like to tell you that right now in the situation, there's a war going on in Sudan, and there's genocide. So genocide, I mean, we had a woman who has been set on fire and burned because she sold alcohol. So this woman had been forced sitting on the fire until she died. In Sudan, men from the north are allowed to marry 4 women, no more than that. So in that case, we had southern women who were married to the Arabs, and when they were married, they were not treated as equal as the Arab women. We are forced to behave like Arabs, or to wear long dress or cover the head. Now we come to the social. We have so many women who have run from the southern Sudan to the north, which is mainly the capital cities, and over there, these women have been forced to go to the desert, where there's no water, they get water weekly, and those women are suffering. I feel like there's no right in the world, or I feel like nobody is seeing what is happening to us.
6 million American women are battered each year by their husbands or their partners. Wife beating results in more injuries that require medical treatment than rape, automobile accidents, and muggings combined in this country. Each year, more than 1,000 women, or 4 women per day, are killed by their husbands or their partners in the United States. The Federal Bureau of Investigation estimates that 1 out of 2 women will be physically abused at some point in their lives by men with whom they live. Anita got an order of protection against her husband who had abused her for several years, and this order of protection, lo and behold, ordered the husband to leave the marital home because she had 2 children. It is very, very rare for a judge to order a man to leave his home. Usually it is a woman who has to leave and look for shelter. And from our experiences, I can tell you, we call hundreds and hundreds of numbers before we are able to find shelter for a client, and especially one with children. Often we have to send them to far-flung places in the state because there is no room in this state for women who are abused by their husbands. We went to the police station to get a police officer to accompany us to serve this order of protection on her husband and ordered him to leave. The cop at the police station said, "What do you think this is, a communist country? We're not going to force him to leave his home. I'll take you to serve the order of protection on him, but I'm not going to throw him out of the house." So, because we had this wonderful piece of paper that was supposed to give her the safety of her own home to live in, we thought we had made one of major victory. However, it was meaningless because the police enforcement agency would not enforce the judge's order. For too long, the endemic violence that women have experienced at the hands of men have been hidden behind this artificial division of the private and the public. Human rights cannot be enforced because this is a private problem. I think that it is about time that the world recognize that when half the world's population is being systematically discriminated against, that it is a human rights violation, and that it has an obligation, that all governments have an obligation to create a situation where the rights of women can be protected and enforced.
I'm going to speak of the situation of women in Muslim countries and communities, highlighting the erosion of our legal rights. And even when our constitutions grant equality to all citizens, some of them make reservations. For instance, Algeria. This trend of fundamentalism in the Muslim world, as well as in many other parts of the world, is growing so fast that we fear that laws which are the worst in some countries may come to all our countries, and this is why we need to oppose them now. We fear that if we do not act, we may be subjected to situations like, for instance, unilateral and oral pronouncement of talaq, that's repudiation, as currently exists in India and many other Muslim countries. That women's rights to vote will be delegated to men, as has happened for 2 years in Algeria. That zina, the crime of zina, which is any sex outside marriage, and it covers both the notion of fornication and adultery in the English legal system, would be punishable by stoning to death, or public flogging, or fine and imprisonment, as currently the case in Pakistan, in the Gulf countries, and now apparently is coming to Somalia and Sudan. That women could be tried and executed for un-Islamic behavior, for instance, laughing in the streets, or allowing a strand of hair to fall out of the hijab, as has happened in Iran. That robbery would be punished by amputation of limbs, as in Sudan and Saudi Arabia. That women would be subjected to forcible contraception, abortion, sterilization, as in Bangladesh and India, or
totally prevented to access to contraception and abortion, as has been the case for a long time in Algeria. That women would not have the right to drive, as in Saudi Arabia. That women would not be able to leave the country without the written permission of their father or husband. This is the guardian that Asma was referring to, as in Kuwait and in Morocco. That women would be circumcised, as in Egypt, Somalia, and Sudan. That women would be forcibly given in marriage by their male guardians, as in all the countries governed by Maliki and Shafi schools in Islam, that is, for instance, Algeria, Morocco, and the north of Africa.
I'm testifying today both as a victim and as an advocate of victims. Under the law as it is applied, the danger of a woman reporting rape is that if she reports it because of the requirements of evidence, if she cannot prove rape, she can be accused of having committed extramarital sex with consent, and the result is that many women today who have been raped have themselves been imprisoned on charges of or accusations of zina because they have not been able to prove rape. Such laws are being consistently used to deny women free choice in marriage. These laws are being consistently used to deny women fundamental rights to liberty and security of person, and such denials are becoming more and more apparent through judicial pronouncements and governmental policies.
I wish to share with you briefly a situation of human rights violations in Asia, which our organization has documented in the last 2 years. These are just some examples, because there are so many forms of violence that now border in its pervasiveness into what we call the modern forms of slavery. And in India, under the Devadasi system in the south, young girls are dedicated to a goddess called Devadasis, or slaves of goddess, and inducted into prostitution. Young girls are also married off to rich old men from the Middle East for monetary consideration, or taken as domestics to the Gulf, where they are often sexually assaulted and brutalized. Despite the Decade of Women, despite the coming 1995 World Conference in Women, our evaluation has been that violence on women is on the increase.
And I approach my testimony from the economic angle. We have all heard about structural adjustment of economic systems. And I would like to testify on behalf of women and share the experiences that they've gone through because of structural adjustment. Now, structural adjustment in many countries have meant cutting government spending before economic aid reaches those countries. Now, what does that mean for the African woman, for the woman in the third world countries? It means that the families can have to pay for education. And because their incomes are low, they have to choose who goes to school and who doesn't go to school. In a system where a male child is treasured as one who carries on the family line, that means that he has the preference. So the girl child falls out of the education system. Now, many of you may be wondering, what has that got to do with human rights? Now, my answer is that when we talk about the right to life, and people are out there dying because they cannot afford medical services, because they have no food, because they are out on the streets, what right to life are we talking about?
I come to testify about the protagonism of the women of Latin America and the Caribbean. We decided
that some of the main issues that we have to deal with in terms of the human rights community, definitions, languages, and mechanisms have to do with the invisibility of women in those processes, with the lack of means of protection and defense of us as women. It also has to do with bringing our needs, our issues, our cases, and our testimonies, and be able to translate them into human rights. I would like to thank you and also issue a call, because this protagonism of the women and our agenda, we feel that has been drafted from Latin America, but we know it is a part of the agenda of all the women here and the women of the world.
I usually testify on behalf of refugee women and abandoned women in camps in Africa. And this is a contrast. To come here and testify on behalf of UN abandoned wives. My testimony is from personal experience. Since many wives of UN staff members have approached me for help with their problems. Mrs. M was married for 24 years. She was a professional woman before she married, but resigned her job in 1979 to follow her husband to New York. She became a housewife and looked after the 5 children and her husband. In 1985, she left New York for a visit home to Africa. On her return to New York, she was shocked to find out that her husband had abandoned the children and was living somewhere else with another woman. Now, these cases describe the mutual problems faced by wives of UN staff members. In this day and age, for a wife to be abandoned at 58 and left with no social security, visa, job, pension, or other source of income should be unthinkable and unacceptable. Yet, it still happens. Not only does the UN refuse to help the abandoned wives, but it blocks justice.
I met Mawini at a shelter in Bangkok. She had just been taken from a brothel in the southern province of Ranong. She was taken by the Thai police who had raided the brothel. She comes from a central town called Nyam Ne Bin, central Burma. 9 months ago, before I met her, it was only 9 months, she was approached by a man who claimed to be a sailor who had just returned from Thailand. He told her that she could make about $120 working as a waitress in Gothong, which is a border town across from Ranong. Economic conditions were growing worse in Burma, and she knew this presented an opportunity of a lifetime. She placed her children in the care of their grandmother and left for the border with the man. On the way, she was joined by 3 other women. This man brought her and the others to a brothel where they were not to work as waitresses, but as prostitutes. She was sold for $120. She did run away once, though, but she was captured, and they made a good example out of her. Mawini lifted her shirt and showed me the scars on her back, the bruises that were made by a steel pipe. And then she showed me the scars that were left by a barbed wire that was wrapped around her tiny neck. And the men, they refused to wear condoms. But she said there were so many customers that any kind of sexual intercourse was constantly, she suffered so much from painful burning sensation and friction sores, of course, which increased the great risk of contracting the HIV. I did not choose this story because this is the worst case. This is just one story that I heard over and over and over again. The Burmese government has refused to allow human rights groups, women's organizations, and international agencies to monitor and provide assistance for these women.
I'd like to read a statement from the Women in Black, Serbian women who vehemently oppose the war in their country. They've protested weekly since October 1991. Here we are, women in black against the war in Belgrade, every week on the streets of the city of our childhood, the city from where the war started, the city of misery at the moment, with the average salary of $50, with thousands of displaced women in our neighborhoods, all of us living with the daily bad news, with a closed airport, with every other adult male having a gun, with lots of women mourning their dead loved ones, wearing black and being too afraid to stand openly for their deepest wishes. Here we are, knowing that many invisible raped women are all around us and that we still haven't reached them. If some of us from the group at the beginning of the war did not know much about the politics, many of us have, in the last year and a half, learned a lot. We see that guns are being used not only against the so-called enemy nation, but also against women, whatever nationality they are. The SOS hotline in Belgrade made an estimation that the rate of rape with the presence of guns has doubled or tripled, and this is only talking of a city where there is not yet war.
And I can talk, I suppose, about the way that lesbians in particular around the world, though we don't need to go much past the United States to find examples of this, are often victims of violence merely because of their sexuality. And I'm struck, as I always am when I hear the testimony from women around the world, about the connection between sexuality and violence, the connection between stepping out of a male-defined role in sexual experiences, sexual activity, and the resulting sentence of violence that often comes from fathers, from husbands, from boyfriends, from brothers, from family friends. Forced marriage is not something that is unknown to lesbians. Parental violence, the violent response to lesbians coming out, to lesbians dealing with their sexuality. Young women who are beaten, who are thrown out of the home, who are institutionalized. Women all around the world who are institutionalized, and particular examples in the former Soviet Union of institutionalizing lesbians merely for the fact that they are lesbians. The rape of lesbians is also documented widely, raping lesbians under the theory that all lesbians need are a good man, is a good man. The rising statistics documenting violence against lesbians in this country are shocking and should be shocking to most of us and serve as a mechanism, I think, for silence.
All kinds of violation against women, especially in the wartime, take so many ugly faces of rape and sexual slavery and abuse, torture, abandonment, and so on. And the only reason is that women are just a female. I would like to share with you a testimony given by a former comfort woman whose name is Hwang Geum-ju, 71 years old. One day she heard the wife of the head of the village, who was Japanese, either a taxman or military police, saying the emperor orders unmarried girls to come and work at a Japanese military factory for 3 years. They can make a lot of money. So to get out of that, she decided to go and work at the factory. It was in 1941 and she was 20 years old. At the train station with other 20 women from villages who were 15 or 16 years old, she was put on a military train by a Japanese soldier. About 50 women were in her car. Without knowing where she was going, she got off the train. She was taken to an officer's room. Despite resistance, her skirt and blouse were torn by the officer's sword. Officers did same things to many other newcomers. After a fortnight with officers, the woman, including Hwang Geum-ju, was sent to the comfort station. And we lived on a little rice and soup boiled only with salt and water. And we had to receive 30 to 40 soldiers a day. But on Sundays and on holidays, soldiers lined up outside in their underwear. She said, I was never paid either with money or coupons. She also said, most women got pregnant a couple of times and contracted the disease. When they were very ill, they were isolated and in another room and brought back when they were recovered. If that happened for the third time, soldiers took the woman somewhere and they didn't see them again. It was and it is violence against females of colonized subjects who were forced into sexual slavery, systematically and organized by the Japanese imperial state. Violence against human rights of women cannot be tolerated under any pretext. The fact that the issue has been so long suppressed and covered up is another form of violence against the human rights. I do believe without healing process and recovery of those comfort women's human rights and broken heart, there will be no true human rights in Asia.
The final testimony that I want to present is from China, was to be presented by a woman from China who felt that it was not safe to appear here but had written the testimony and wanted to present it and is with us tonight. Just like women in other countries of the world, Chinese women have been suffering from violence. In the past 10 years, violence against women in China has increased significantly in several forms, including the kidnapping and sale of women and forced marriage. On New Year's Day in 1989, in Linshu County of Shandong Province, 16-year-old Li Zuolan was married to a man 26 years her senior. After the wedding, she tried several times to run away, but each time she was caught and tied up and beaten by her husband. He drove needles under her fingernails. She was bruised and bloodied from head to foot, and her arms were swollen to the size of her legs. When people from the County Women's Federation arrived to save her, her husband ran out and yelled, "What do you think you are doing? She is mine. I got her in exchange for my little sister." How common are such forced marriages in rural China? Under China's current political and social conditions, it is impossible for an individual to get any nationwide statistics. But I believe that I can gather from the following regional statistics support for my case that this is a common occurrence. I won't read from you the 3 pages of statistics, but these are gathered from different regional provinces by the woman who gave us this testimony, and we would like to enter it.
The statistics that we've shared here tonight are, in my view, quite shocking. And it has been instructional to note that the things that are happening to women are not localized to one group of countries or another group of countries. They are universal. 50% of the world's population is being discriminated against, is being violated, their rights are being violated, not just in my neck of the woods or yours, but worldwide. I agree with the speaker that said women have been protagonists for so many causes. We have come to this place now to be protagonists for ourselves. It is often easy for women from industrialized countries or even countries like my own to say, women should, women should, women should, women should. Do this. Make your governments do that. Stand up for this. Stand up for that. I say tonight, I understand that sometimes we want to stand, but the weight of the world is on our shoulders. And so I say to women who can say governments should do, governments must do, that it is our responsibility to bring to the attention of the international community the cause of those women who hold up half the sky but cannot go into court and say, I am a person. Thank you.